Hey everyone, welcome back. Good to see you. It's CA Gordon, and we're at the beginning of a new month and new year. And so I figured we'd start things off with a nice little update. And as is true with all literary irony, I've started off this year with a good old fashioned cold. That in itself is not irony, but the circumstances of me having this cold, kind of. So the short of it is, my wife and I went to get our flu shots on Tuesday a couple weeks ago, and then I came down with cold symptoms the next morning. Which I know some of you might think, well, wait a second, that's probably a reaction to the vaccine, but actually, it's not. I was around a couple of people who either they had just gotten over a cold or their kid had just gotten over a cold the previous Saturday. So if you know how viruses and stuff kind of work out, between Saturday and when we got the flu shots, everything was kind of chill. And then I think I tipped into it the next morning. So anyway, I've been kind of fighting that a little bit. And the voices, I'm almost completely out of it, but the voice is a little shot. So whatever. Um, I live in Northern California, and it's been the rainy season. And with kids out of school and everyone being home with the families and stuff, it's just going around. So it is my turn. My missus has been fortunate enough to not catch it, but that's also because she's kind of quarantined me to these three and a half walls of my office. So good on her. Um, Speaking of which, may as well do some updates around the rest of life. I mean, so my wife has some chronic health stuff that some days are better than others, and over the past couple of weeks, she's had a pretty good streak of better than others. But then they've been mixed in with some that aren't. So between that and our dog, he's kind of a dog. He's a pug, and she loves it, and I'm pretty fond of it. But are they really dogs though? Like on the scale of breeds, whatever. They just got through the door, in my opinion. But so we're doing okay like that. Um, on on the life front, so I love writing, and as you can see, I've got the logo for the series that I've published two volumes or two entries of so far. That's not my main gig. Unfortunately, I haven't had a main gig for a while. Um, Most of my working life, I've been an administrative professional, so a lot of office work, executive assistants, admin, some tech troubleshooting. I'm usually the guy that plugs in the stuff or helps fix the thing. And in the summer, late summer of 2023, I was working for a very large company and got a very large tech company, in fact, and got caught up in a wave of layoffs. And so there's been the last 2 years almost have been ups and downs, mostly downs. So I haven't been consistently working. And so that's been taking up a lot of my bandwidth and emotional energy and brain power and all of that stuff to find and look for and find and secure work. So that's kind of how most of the last year and a half has gone, with varying degrees of success. In fact, I released Teen Justice Book One in the summer of 2022, three, and then I was able to release. It's in the thing, and then I was able to release the follow up a year later on Black Friday, and I had hoped to release Book Three this past fall between November and December, and it was because of that life stuff that I mentioned that hasn't happened. Although I have written a chunk of it, and I continue to do that. But in the meantime, this search for work has been, as you can imagine, pretty paramount in my priorities. So much so that, but the job market has been gnarly, and I'm sure I'm not the first one to mention that to all you guys. Having said that, over the past couple months, try to decide, okay, well, while applying for tons of work and what I know how to do, the idea is maybe I learn something I don't know, and or finish learning something that I had started to a while ago. And as I mentioned, I've been the fix it guy that the on the tech side of things. I've always been the troubleshooter in the office, and so this about a month or so ago, I decided to say, okay, well, why don't we shift career paths? I can either I can either look for work and not get it, or I can look for work and not get it while learning something. So I'm going back to school for a little bit to get some certifications for entry level IT support, and that I've been doing it self paced for the last month or so. But I've registered for some courses that begin in a few weeks. So having said all that, that's going to take another several months, which will realistically it'll delay the completion of Teen Justice Curfew has a book. Curfew has a book. Justice has a curfew book 3. That's going to be delayed, the completion and publication of it a little bit, because again, you know I would love for writing to be my main thing. Actually, I've only had really two professional dreams. I'll mention the second one later, but the first one is to have the job that I get to quit in order to be a full time writer. But I can't do that unless I have a job first. So I need to. I'm going to be training to get a job that hopefully later I can leave because booking. Um, in the meantime, I still am trying to devote some time and energy to my kids, as I call them. The characters in my stories. Um, and to keep creative, to keep those juices flowing. I've actually in the last few months met and developed some new friends through others, and actually joined. There's a writers group, right? A bunch of dudes, all family men, all employees and employers, and husbands and fathers and that. But they we get together a couple times, virtually, and share ideas about storytelling and have little assignments. And so we've had a few of those sessions recently, and it's nice because I don't know about you, and depending on your age, but it's a little challenging to make new friends post whatever 25, 30, 35, heading towards 40. So making new friends is kind of for me anyway, it's a bit of a challenge unless there's a decent amount of mutual stuff that paves the way to that. So it's been nice to make new friends who are also interested in storytelling and writing. But now let's get to some more writing actual stuff, right? Here's a status update on Justice Has a Curfew Book 3. So I mentioned on an Instagram post a while back, and I'll repeat it here, that I have already gotten a good chunk of the draft of book 3 done. I've finished the prologue and the first 4 chapters completely, and I'm well into chapter 5. Now, that may sound, actually, I don't know how that sounds. I believe the story it's been out, the whole thing's been outlined. The whole first series, books 1, 2, and 3, were outlined to be 3 parts of a larger story, with the sort of Back to the Future approach where there are 3 complete stories within it, but one larger tale. Anyway, so all of book 3 has already been outlined, and it's just waiting for me to draft those chapters and sculpt the dialogue and write the action scenes and all of that. But with the plan for me to get some coursework in, I'm going to need some balance over the next 6 months. So hopefully I'm able to devote some time to writing, if not every day, hopefully, certainly each week, to get chip away at it a little bit. But I do have a tentative completion date, because if I hadn't decided to look for work as well as take some training on top of the writing, I probably could knock out a draft of book 3 entirely by this summerish, Memorial Day, 4th of July weekendish. But it would be a rush job, and I don't want to do that, right? This is the phrase that's been in my head ever since I ostensibly wrote "to be concluded" at the end of book 2, was for this endeavor with book 3 is to stick the landing. Right. I'm not a gymnast, but when I was younger, I used to do a little gymnastics, and I watched the Olympics, and I've been a dancer and done performances, and it's, stick that landing, or in another parlance, like land the plane. Like that's my goal with book 3, is to, we've taken off in this journey with books 1 and 2, And book three is supposed to be this culmination. It's supposed to end and then start something new. My idea is just land the plane safely. So many thirds or conclusions or things like that end up disappointing. And while ultimately art is subjective, me as an author and as a reader, like I want it to be satisfying for myself. I want it to meet the standards that I set for it way many years ago. Oh, by the way, I'm looking over here because I have notes to keep me on track. So, yeah, again, prologue through book or through chapter four and a bit of chapter five of book three is complete, and the soundtrack is in progress. In fact, chapter five, I was excited to get to because there's a song, and we'll get to it in time. But when I was considering what plays the first adventure for my kids, I was going through music pieces, and then I remembered a song that it had a moment, and then it didn't. Then it disappeared as much ephemeral art tends to do. But when I heard it, I got amped up, and I could just see. I write cinematically, so I envision scenes and stage direction and things like that, and I could just hear the music cue that blasted my kids out on their adventure. It's sort of like tell this story really quickly. I've referenced Back to the Future a couple times in either interviews or podcasts, and it's a pristine trilogy, and the story behind the story is equally fascinating. Anyway, Robert Zemeckis and Robert Gale are the two guys who co-wrote the movie and the movies, and then Robert Zemeckis directed them. And when it came time to score the film, Alan Silvestri, who was a great composer, he scored it brilliantly. But because this is a mid 1980s movie, they wanted some contemporary music. And Universal is like, we got to have a song on the radio. And so at the time, Huey Lewis was huge. His album had just, exploded. And so he was very much in the public consciousness. And so Robert Zemeckis said, we need a song. The very beginning, Marty's going to go to Doc's house, and we're going to be introduced to this Rube Goldberg system of describing what the Doc is like. And Marty's going to have this giant speaker. It's going to, explode. And then he's going to realize that he's late for school. And the moment that he hangs up the phone, he's going to blast out of the garage and go to school. And we need a song that you could just imagine kids rocking out to. And Huey Lewis apparently wrote something, and he brought it to the director, and the director was like, okay, now I kind of need something bigger. I need like something like I Want a New Drug. He played Huey's song, I Want a New Drug, which has its own interesting story if you're familiar with how that sounds versus the theme to Ghostbusters. But my point is, Huey Lewis realized, oh, you need like a major song. And he went home and he wrote The Power of Love. And if you watch the opening of Back to the Future, Marty says, I'm late for school. And the second he slams the phone down, you hear, which I don't know if that's going to get flagged or not. I've not had to deal with music on YouTube. Anyway, the opening notes of Power of Love perfectly get Marty out the door and on his way skateboarding to school. And he's cool, and it's high school, and it's the 80s. Having said all that, I heard a song several years ago that sounded exactly like the moment that my kids, my superpowered teenagers, go out on their first adventure. So I'm excited for that to be included with the curated playlist for book three. And as I mentioned, I do have a tentative completion date now with the adjustment of my courses for around Black Friday. So whatever that is, Thanksgiving, and then the Friday afterwards of this year, 2026. Yeah. So look out for that. That's going to be cool. And over the course of the next few months, I'm going to continue to, what I've been doing on my Instagram when I am able to post is I'll do snippets of the soundtrack for the previous books. I don't know if I've completed all of book one. I might have, but I'm most of the way through book two's soundtrack. And so each posting is another song with a little bit of background behind it and a snippet of either the scenes or the dialogue that were either inspired by that music or inspired me to select that piece, right? Because sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. So that's what I'll continue to do with my social media over the next few months is continuing the soundtrack for book two. Now, switching gears a little bit, one of the things that I've been considering, the stories that I've been writing, they are for a young adult audience insofar as the main characters are young adults. Having said that, I don't know how to write for young adults. I've just been writing and recognizing that this has some hopefully has some appeal to a younger audience. Now, my primary audience, as I said, is me. I like to read what I like to write what I like to read, but I'm considering a major shift after the release of book three, and that is to reclassify the Teen Justice series away from the young adult designation to general sci-fi fantasy. Like right now, Teen Justice 1 and Teen Justice 2, the ISBN numbers that I've coded and the copyright status and all the bookstores online and everything, they're if you buy them in a bookstore, they're in the young adult sci-fi fantasy section. And I got no problem with that. That's totally fine. But I've been speaking with several readers and um, press and things like that. And I wondered if this could appeal to a broader audience. Because again, I'm not writing down, I'm also not writing up. I'm just writing based off of my sensibilities and my level of intellect. I mean, one of my several of the characters in my stories are way smarter than I am. So it's been fun to learn things to put in their mouths, right? Or to make it seem like they're familiar with. But I guess again, I'm seriously considering reclassifying the Teen Justice series to sci-fi fantasy. Now that's not. Let me make this very clear. That is not because I'm including subjects or writing dialogue or including content that is not suitable for young adults. That's not the case. I am not that type of person. In fact, because of my values and the way I live my life, I'm very conscious of what I put out in the world. And so I mean at the same time, there's a rating system for TV and for video games and for movies, and there's a bit of subjectivity that comes into play. When I was in community college communications, I did a report on the history of the rating system. And so like with the MPAA, up until the mid 1980s, there was G, PG, R, NC-17, and X. And then right around the mid 80s, when Steven Spielberg did Indiana Jones Temple of Doom, because sequels in a trilogy tend to be the darker story. If you think of the original Star Wars trilogy, Empire was the down note, and then Jedi had Ewoks. Well, in Indiana Jones, Temple of Doom was the darker one because of the kid forced labor and the darker elements of it. And Last Crusade was a fun romp with Dad. So Steven Spielberg actually petitioned the MPAA. He said, this movie I got, it's not so adult and dark that it deserves an R rating, but I don't think it's quite as palatable as something PG. So is there a way we can get something in between? And he petitioned the MPAA, and they came up with the PG-13 rating, which parental guidance suggested or parents strongly caution may not be suitable for children under 13. And that has kind of become the sweet spot for the vast majority of blockbusters. Because if you want to appeal to a large audience with a lot of money, and kids and their parents tend to have, kids' parents tend to have the most money for big tentpole movies, every superhero franchise, with a few exceptions, right? There's going to be some that are G and there's going to be some that are R, but the vast majority of Cape and Masks are all PG-13 because you don't want to exclude an audience. You don't want to exclude a dollar sign. Now, I don't look at readers or an audience as dollar signs, period. However, I recognize the sensibility in making something palatable to a mass audience. And I've always imagined my writing style to be, and from the very beginning, when I conceived these stories as a teenager, I always envisioned my writing style and the content, the description or the descriptiveness and the content to be between a PG and PG-13 level of of of, of detail, of language, of situation, of tone. I mean, there are certain stories that simply because of the tone merit a higher rating because you can't really tell a story that involves, let's say, a form of child abuse or of sexual abuse or of violence you cannot tell a story in which that is an element without it automatically earning a bit of a rating. So, having said all that, I've always approached my writing, and certainly books one and two, I've always taken the approach that I want this to be palatable for a teenager and above. And I think what I decided early on when I published the first draft of book one was, well, of course, it's about young adults, so it's young adult fiction. And I think that was not the way to go. So I am going to be seriously reconsidering reclassifying the Teen Justice banner to be general sci-fi fantasy as opposed to young adult sci-fi fantasy. One more time, it's not to exclude younger ones, it's just to open up to a broader audience. And one last sort of pitch for this. So I'm a millennial, and this year I'm going to be turning 40. Well, I'm writing these kids the way I was a teenager 20 years ago. So the hope is that I can extend my audience, not just from 13 to 18-year-olds now. I don't speak their language, so I don't know if there's much that will appeal to them. Hopefully, there's a timeless quality to the interaction, blah, blah, blah. But I think my target audience are their parents. Is anyone like, who was a teenager and who may not be one now. So hopefully I can capture as many more eyes as possible. All right, enough of that. It's something fun now. So I mentioned book three is almost done, and I hope, or is in progress, and I hope for it to get done before the end of this year. What I want to do after that, so I've released books one and two as paperbacks and as EPUBs. And something that I hope to do is also get them as audiobooks, because when I don't have a cold, I have been told I have a decent enough voice. And also I know what these characters sound like. So at some point I have to record an audiobook for books one and two and three. But once this initial trilogy is done as separate individual books, that was redundant, I want to release an ultimate edition, which is the just Teen Justice : Justice Has a Curfew, the complete story. And I want to release it as a hardback. And so what that'll include, obviously, is that I look at it the way many of my favorite directors will do an ultimate edition. Zack Snyder is a director that I enjoy some of his work, and he likes to release an ultimate edition. And usually that's a lot more material and the tone might be different, but I'm also someone who loves special features on DVDs and Blu-rays. So my ambition for Teen Justice, Justice Has a Curfew, is to release an ultimate edition, which is not only the story, all three stories combined into one, without the act breaks, so to speak, of the individual stories that have been told, but I'm again looking at my notes, special features. So, character bios, some artwork, diagrams. The city that my kids live in is stacked like a 5 layer cake. What does that look like? I've done some tentative drawings over the past, 25 years, but it would be nice to see something a bit more substantive and to include that. There's a lot of dial or terminology and concepts and jargon that I've created over these 3 books. It'd be nice perhaps to get like a diagram guide, a glossary, an index. There are laws in place and terms and gadgets and stuff. It's always fun to see the little extras. And also the complete suggested, unofficial suggested, the complete soundtrack. Um, my wife and I were at a library book sale. They have them several times a year where we live. And without fail, at the front of it, there's always the section of CDs. And you'd be surprised just how many songs are featured in a single film. An example that I'll use, it might be overused and it's pretty obvious, is the movie Forrest Gump. There's most movies have, excuse me, 2 soundtracks. One is the score, and another is the songs that were included in the movie. I'm going to pause here because anytime I talk about that, I have to give credit to my favorite composer and the progenitor of the dual soundtrack model, which is Danny Elfman. Danny Elfman is Danny Elfman. If you don't know who he is, you're lying. That's from Jim Gaffigan. Well, when Danny Elfman composed the score for the 1989 film Batman, Warner Brothers tapped Prince to do an album, and it's a great album. And then Danny Elfman did the score, and the producers liked the score so much that they said, "We're going to do something we haven't done before. We're going to release them both." So, easily accessible. I do. Oh wait, I don't. This is great. Oh, because it's in the car. Well, this is Danny's score. I don't know what you guys saw because the camera zoomed in. I'm sorry. This is Danny's score. And the other album, the Prince one, is just a giant bat logo. And that's got a bunch of songs on it, including Bat Dance. Having said that, Forrest Gump has a soundtrack that has got like 40 or something. It's got a ridiculous amount of contemporary songs on it because it's almost 3 hour movie. Well, I have over the past 3 books had lots of songs that have either inspired scenes or that would sound cool if these were ever optioned to be more than words on a page. And so I'm excited to include that in the ultimate edition of Justice Has a Curfew. So that's a teaser for what I hope to happen. But of course that doesn't happen until after I complete book 3 and get it published and out there. And obviously time has to go by and so forth. Now I mentioned earlier, hey, screensaver, come back. Come back. There you go. I mentioned earlier that I've only had 2 professional dreams. One of them, of course, is to have the job that I quit to get to be a writer. The other one is sort of the culmination of that. Now, I'm a Southern California raised kid, specifically San Diego County, and I grew up getting to go to San Diego Comic-Con for many years. And as a fan, it's amazing. I actually got to see, I got to be there at its peak, and I also got to see the kind of shift for to where it started to get a little less awesome. There's still awesome elements about it, don't get me wrong. And last time I went was amazing because it was 2019, the 80th anniversary of the character of Batman being created. So at Balboa Park, they had a museum exhibit full of Batman, and that was amazing. But my other professional dream is that for all those years that I attended Comic Con, I was a fan attending the big panel in Hall H, going down Artist Alley and with my comic or my poster for the artist or the writer or the actor or the voiceover artist to sign and to say, hey, I love your work, and so on and so forth. So my other professional dream is to actually be on the other side of that table at Comic Con. And it's been something, it's something that requires money and also, notoriety, whatever. Being known helps, but almost anyone can reserve a booth at Comic Con for the right price and set it up and be at San Diego Comic Con. And so that's something that I want to achieve over the next. I mean, like, it's too late for this year, and obviously I don't have enough of a finished series to present, but it is my hope and hopefully a goal. I said hope twice. It is a goal for me to release the ultimate edition of Justice as Curfew at San Diego Comic Con, hopefully summer 2027. So saying it out loud and recording it means I've kind of got to commit to finishing book three and releasing it, and then getting book four up on it. Or, ooh, I misspoke. Getting the ultimate edition of book three up on its feet, so that were I to be able to go to Comic Con as an exhibitor, I would be able to have a setup with books one, two, three, Ultimate Edition, merch, stickers, bookmarks, all that good stuff. So that's something that I would love to do. But again, it all starts with the completion of book three. Uh Winding down, getting towards the end of this. As far as I mentioned a little bit ago, just kind of updates, right? This is an update video. I'm going to do more with the social media. I have a website. It's linked in the below. In the below, it's linked below. Um, I just bought the domain for it, so I got to figure out some website connection stuff. And maybe if you have some insights, you can let me know in the comments. I'm the website that I have is currently being hosted by Wix, but I just purchased my name website.com, and so I know I got to connect the two, but then that's more money and other stuff and things. And I don't know if I should stick with Wix or go to WordPress or something else, but that is in the works. On the social media side, I have an Instagram that I will post updates on. And though I don't do this that often separately, I also have a Facebook that's connected to I mean, they're like this. So everything that I do on Instagram automatically goes to Facebook. And I'm not on that a whole lot, but I do, have one. And then ultimately, like, the goal, right, is to continue building an audience. And I think in one of my last posts, I did a promotion, and it's open ended, right? I would love to gain as many readers and build an audience as much as possible. So I'm like, the paperbacks and the ebooks are available for purchase. There's links on my website. You can go to Amazon and Barnes and Noble. My website has direct links to Ingram Spark, which is the distributor that I use for the paperbacks. But at the same time, I'm also like willing to give away copies of book one and two as either secure PDFs, meaning they're official Adobe PDFs. I've built in a password for them. You'll get that with and some instructions, or a EPUB. Like, I'm willing to just continue like giving them away for people who want them. So all you got to do is just like ask me and let me know which way you want. And you can reach out to me by Instagram. You can respond to this video. You can go to my website. I've got I think I've got a name and address and whatever thing on there. So like, just let me know, because again, just like a restaurant can't survive, like, in order for restaurants to survive its first year, it has to survive its first 5 years. I learned that working at a restaurant, and I remember the owner saying on the grand opening, he was like, "Okay, if we make it to five, then we might make it." I'm thinking, what? We're thinking two things, and thinking, "Whoa, that's don't go into the restaurant industry." But also, like, that's very intriguing to have to anticipate the long game. So I'm hoping to just build a community, build an audience, and so on and so forth. So that is it for now. um, I know there's a ton of stuff. I'm gonna try and figure out how to make like the little chapter segments so that you can like click to fast forward. I did it again. I looked at my watch in the last video and I said I shouldn't have. I'm sorry. Um, I'll try to make little chapters for this to be more digestible. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for your time, your consideration, your patronage, the engagement. It's really appreciated. And look, be on the lookout for the next video. So I got a new one of these guys, and that was really what was kind of the hiccup from last video and delays and me making more. So now I got a new mic and a decent enough camera. Um, so I'm hoping to generate some momentum in making more of these. Still no master editing skills yet because time and effort, but looking forward to our next video. My next video is going to be a condensed version of like the 3-part retrospective blog that's available on my website. It's sort of my author's journey from first ideas about teen justice to the last bit was all of the life that happened before me deciding to draft and submit something for publishing. So that was that. So I'll do a video that condenses those 3 blogs, which are still available on the website. Read them. If you don't want to hear my voice, read them. And it's not like I'm going to narrate them verbatim in the next video, but I'll relate that story, and then I'll get into also sort of the drafting and submission process for Teen Justice Just As Curfew 1, all of the ups and downs and the inner workings about that. So look forward to that. Thank you guys again so much, and we'll see you next time.